Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. Staying happy and healthy, especially this time of year where it's near Christmas. And in this video, I have more stories of weird encounters and experiences that you don't really know what the thing was. Or you might think it's something different than what's listed in the story. So, if that sounds like your cup of tea, then definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So my dad has a ranch in Texas. It's 50 acres in the middle of absolute nowhere. Me and my older brother decide to go out there for a weekend getaway. We stay in a hunting cabin on the property. 1 bedroom, a living room, and then a small kitchenette. My brother takes the bedroom because he's older, and I didn't really feel like fighting, so I slept on the couch. The morning after we get there, I wake up and I feel groggy. I notice that the front door is open. My brother is standing at the kitchen window across from me. He turns to look at me. He's sitting up. He says, "I'll be right back," in a really high-pitched voice. He walks out the door really awkwardly and leaves the door open behind him. I say, "At least close the door, the AC's running." I get to my feet and I hear the sink running in the bathroom, and I think, wait, what? And my brother walks out of the bathroom and says, "Oh, were you trying to talk to me?" To this day, I almost feel like I dreamed the whole thing. There was no weird smell or weird sounds, but I was on edge the whole of the next 2 days. My neighbor mentioned later that he had found a half-eaten deer on his property, and he found it that morning. We do get mountain lions, but it's a very rare occurrence, and even more unusual to find their leftovers. No idea what the hell happened. Interestingly enough, the only truly weird encounter that I've had in my entire life was something that I have no better explanation for, besides calling it a werewolf or some kind of bipedal, long-muzzled creature. So I'm pretty sure that I was younger. I was about 12 years old, and this was back in the 90s. It was almost Christmas. I lived up in the mountains in this tiny little town, so there was all kinds of snow in the winter. My stepdad curates a local historic mine during the off-season, and he has access, because of this, to back roads that most locals don't know about or aren't allowed on. So I'm traveling with my stepdad, and it's in the early evening. I think it's dusk, but not quite dark. It was on one of those roads that winds up the mountain to the mine. We are driving in my mom's big orange 1980s Dodge pickup. It's a huge truck and has huge tires. The snow berms on either side of the road are a couple of feet taller than the truck, as the snow had been going on for days and days on end. That, and of course the road being recently plowed, made for the huge berms. So we're going up into the woods to cut down our own Christmas tree. I'm chatting with my stepdad about whatever, I don't remember. Both of us are watching the road as we cruise along at about 25 to 30 miles per hour up this super twisty road. Suddenly, a figure drops from over the snow berm on the right side of the road, maybe a dozen or 2 feet in front of us. My stepdad brakes, and we both get a fairly good look at it. It's incredibly tall, with a large muzzle, like a dog or a wolf. It's covered in hair. I don't remember seeing a tail, but I do remember its huge arms and huge back legs. It had pointy ears, and it stood bipedal. The creature pauses for a split second on the road. It whips its head toward us briefly. Then it crouches down and vaults over the berm on the left side of the road, with barely taking a step. My stepdad lets off the brake and keeps driving. He's tight-lipped and pale, with wide eyes. I'm too stunned to do anything right away, so I just stare at the road. After a few minutes, I turn to my stepdad and say, "Did you?" And he cuts me off before I even finish and says, "I don't really want to talk about it." Suffice to say, I was terrified by the time we had to stop for a stupid tree, but we make short work of it and are soon back on our way home. I feel panicky on the way back. I even notice my stalwart stepdad seems pretty shaken, and he drives to the spot where we saw the thing a little quicker than one should, considering our road conditions. He still refused to talk about it years later. Any time I tentatively brought it up, he would just refuse, flat out. I still can't explain just what the hell I saw. If it was just me, I would think I was crazy, but it's obvious my stepdad saw it too. So let me tell you about the time that a weird old man spent an afternoon with me and my family. I was 12 years old or so at the time, and I was raised out in the sticks. It was a tiny property surrounded by an old wooden fence. There's a country road that runs along the fence for about a mile. My dad and I are outside doing some work one day when we see someone coming down the road. We never see anyone traveling down this road, much less on foot. As the traveler gets closer, we can see that it's a very old man. He's just limping along, carrying a leather satchel on his shoulder. My dad calls out to him. He invites him in for lunch, and Dad never does this with strangers, but whatever, I don't question my elders. The old man obliges and follows me and Dad into the house. Mom serves cornbread and honey, and we eat in a really awkward silence for a while. Then, the old man drops his leather satchel onto the table. He begins to tell us a weird story while we eat. He says that he's a root worker, when people in my parts call this a power man from up north. He says he's been traveling for several weeks, that he's being pursued by something. I assume he means like an animal has been hunting him, but it becomes clear that he's talking about some kind of entity. He just calls it the thing. He claims that this thing has been moving west along the Appalachian Trail, more or less, following him. A month ago, he stayed with a family in North Carolina. He says he slept overnight in their barn. The next morning, the family's oldest son was found seemingly strangled in his sleep. The family thought the old man had something to do with it and chased him off the property. But somehow, the old man managed to escape, even with his limp. The whole story seems incredibly suspicious to me, but I'm 12 at the time, so what do I do, right? The old man says, "It wasn't me who killed the boy." It's like he's reading my thoughts. He claims that this thing has been following him, is responsible for the boy's death. So far, this guy isn't sounding much like a power man to me, but my mom and dad appear to believe every word he says. Even Dad, who hates people and is very intense, seems really relaxed around this guy. The old man reaches into his leather satchel, and he leaves his hand in there. I shoot a glance at Dad. No reaction. I'm feeling very nervous, but I decide to just keep my trap shut because Dad was not averse to beating my ass if I interrupted the adults while they were talking. Anyway, the old man goes on. He says that the entity has been following him, or whatever it is going to pass through our farm next. He wants to pray with us to keep it from harming us. My parents agree. The old man pulls his hand out of the satchel and reaches for my hand. I'm sitting next to him. Now we're all holding hands around the table, and he begins to pray. The prayer is in French, which is weird to us. But even weirder, his hands start to get really hot. Like when you touch the outside of a hot toaster. By the time the old man is finishing his prayer, his hand is starting to seriously burn. He concludes the prayer. He says that we should all be safe, and that we need to be careful for the next few days. We're still holding hands at this point, and I notice that his hand is now noticeably cool. Then, He grabs his satchel and gets up. He says he's going to move on to the next place to warn the next family. We follow him outside. The three of us watch as he limps down the road. I remember wondering what he kept in that satchel. Now 2 days later, one of our cows dropped dead suddenly. No obvious cause. It's like it just keeled over in the field. Other than that, life goes on as normal and nothing else happens. Very weird. Looking back on my time there in Arkansas, I have one story that's kind of strange. I was 25. I was living in a small town of about 450. This was just outside of Batesville. It was around midnight. I worked nights, so I'm usually up at this hour on my days off. I was bored, so I was swiping on Tinder, and I matched with a pretty enough girl that seemed to have more boobs than brains. I go to pick her up, and she stays about 25 minutes northwest of me. Now the road that she lived on was a little dirt road off the main highway. It went for about 5 miles into the forest, and then it looped around and met back with the highway about a mile north. So I'm driving, jamming out to some music, and I end up missing the first turn onto the dirt road. I think, whatever, I'll just take the next turn, even though it's the long way, but they go to the same place. I turn down the dirt road, and there's nothing out of the ordinary. There's houses here and there, typical Arkansas road. I arrive at the girl's house. I make a mental note to just follow the road through on the way back since it's less distance. As I'm pulling out of her driveway and turning my wheel, she shouts at me, "No." I stop and be like, "Is there something wrong?" She says the other way is faster, just go, gesturing to the way I came, which was the longer way by about 2 miles. And at that point I was just thinking, well, whatever she wants, I guess, whatever gets me laid. I take the long way home. Nothing interesting happens. I give her the best I can, and then I head back to drop her off. She tells me not to use a GPS, and she can direct me back. She has me take the long way again. At this point, it's almost 3 a.m., and there's a light fog sitting in over the fields and in the forests. Before I leave, she tells me to take the long way back. I decide, screw that. My truck gets 15 miles per gallon. I'm taking the short way. There's no houses along the road this way. About a couple blocks from her house, the whole atmosphere starts to get weird. I get this terrible, terrible gut feeling. It's not so much like I was being watched, but more like that feeling of being stalked. I see movements behind me in my side mirrors. I roll my windows up, and my heart's beating out of my chest. I really do feel like that I'm about to die. With about 2 miles until the main road, I feel a draft on the back of my neck. My heart sinks to my balls. I forgot to close the sliding window on the back of my cab. I can feel the presence behind me, and I've pretty much accepted my fate at this point. I don't even dare to look in the rearview mirror. At this point, I want out. I'm doing 60 down a curvy dirt road in the fog, and I'm just trying to make it to the main road. I finally make it to the main road, and I start feeling better, slowly. I still don't check the mirror all the way home. I get out of the truck, I lock it, and I go into the house without looking back, and I pass out on the couch. The next day, I'm Snapchatting the girl. She's saying she had a great time and felt a connection, the stuff that people say. We had made plans to hang out again the next day. All was going well until I told her about my drive home. She got really angry and said, "I told you not to go that way," and she blocked me. I don't know what the hell's going on in those woods or what was out there, but I'm never going back. I should point out that I've never felt this kind of fear before. I've been jumped, I've had gangbangers pull guns on me, I've had near-death experiences with a tornado, but none of that comes close. Yeah, I was terrified those times, but this time was different. Those times I could easily tell why I was scared, and why I had a reason to be. This time it was like that deep, primal fear that was programmed into me as a reaction since day one. I don't know why I was feeling it, but I just had to feel it. I don't want to feel that way again. I know it's kind of anticlimactic, but that's really the only strange Arkansas story I have. Just as my little note at the end of that, I included this one because I've heard stories. I don't know what it is, but I've heard stories of like certain entities that will make you feel this primal fear, so you'll speed up like this guy did, and in his case he didn't make a mistake, so he got out fine. But in the other people's cases, they aren't so lucky. They make a mistake and they end up dying or getting seriously injured, and at that point I don't know what the entity or spirit or cryptid wants with your body. Maybe it wants some kind of fear energy, your soul, just if you die, probably your body, but I don't know, just other stories that I've heard. I'm making a note here, so if I find more of them, I'll put them in the video in another one, but yeah. This happened in May of 2013, give or take a few weeks. So I live in the Ozarks, and I live quite a ways out of town. Now, one popular story from where I live is the Goatman. He's believed to live in the woods somewhere in the area, and I go explore the woods all the time when I get bored. I've been damn near everywhere in the woods, especially those near my house. There's one spot though that I never really ventured to. This was because the trees were extremely dense there. Just looking in, you couldn't see much farther than a few feet. I've walked around it before. I think it covers maybe 2 to 3 miles of land. A friend I've known since before kindergarten came to visit from out of state. We went exploring in the woods the first day that he got there. After walking for a while and catching up, I tell him about the story of the Goatman, and I say how this dense area of the forest always gave me the heebie-jeebies. And he says, "Whatever, man, that story sounds like effing shit, so screw it, we should just go in and put this to rest." And I'm hesitant, but I do go in. The moment we enter the area, I get chills that run up my spine. We venture deeper in, and it's super creepy. The thick overhead foliage blocks out way too much light for my liking. We hear something in the bushes. We stand our ground, not sure of what to do. This huge rattlesnake comes slithering out a few feet from us. Now, snakes bother me, so I end up running. He ran too, but we ran in different directions. I start to slow down when I realize that he's not with me anymore. I hear this deafening shriek after a few minutes that I knew couldn't have been more than 75 to 100 feet away. I stop running and I start calling for my friend, yelling his name. There's no response. I realize that I have to go back the way my friend was running. I know these woods. He doesn't. I keep yelling his name, and there's still no response. I'm dodging through trees frantically, calling his name, getting very worried. He steps out from behind a tree, and I run into him. He's much larger than I am, so I fall, and he doesn't move an inch from the impact. I'm pissed off at him that he didn't answer my shouts. I tell him let's find our way out of here and get back to my house to smoke. Suddenly, he seems to know the woods, like a master of the woods. He leads us straight out of the dense area of trees within minutes and lingers at the edge and looks back in as if he doesn't want to leave. I think, whatever, I brush it off as just weird feelings, and we go back to the house. I toss him a joint and a lighter, and he stares at it, looking perplexed. He's smoked before, plenty of times. The guy should know how a lighter works. I take them from him, and I light it myself. He stares at me in awe as I do that and other mundane, everyday things. I've read a lot of stories about the Goatman, and this seems to fit the bill so far. I dismiss it though, as me being still paranoid and hopped up on adrenaline, so I continue to chill with my best friend. It starts to get late, and I tell him that he can crash in my spare bedroom. He says, I gotta run home and get something. I'll probably just sleep there tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. He's visiting me from out of state, over 12 hours away. I say, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, trying to see where this is going. He gets up, walks outside, leaves his car keys, and just walks straight into the woods. I lock all the doors and the windows. Something is seriously wrong here. The next morning, I call a few friends and I have them come over. If that guy comes back, I don't want to be alone with him. He shows up a few hours later, wearing the same clothes as the previous day. I notice that there's blood under his fingernails. I guess he was hungry last night and needed to eat. Thankfully, it wasn't me. He had arrived on the 5th of May, and he was planning to leave on the 12th, but I wanted him gone now, and it had only been a day. I asked him when he plans on going home. I tell him that he's been here nearly a week, and that he planned on leaving today. He says, oh, yeah, I'll probably get going in a few hours. Now, for me, this is confirmation that this is not my friend. He's only been here a day, but believes it's been a week when I tell him so. The hours drag on slowly, but he doesn't become hostile or anything. He just kinda watches, and eventually he stands up and gets in his car and drives away. That was earlier in the month, and he never came back, so I'm assuming that he actually went home. I haven't heard from him since then, and I don't want to either. I don't know, we've been best friends for nearly 18 years, and it feels like he's gone. Like I said, this happened in 2013, and honestly, I don't know what to do. I feel like that first night that he left, that maybe he was going back in the woods to, eat my friend's actual body. I'm currently 20, but at the time of this story, I was 18. And this was just around the time that COVID started getting bad. And once again, I'm not great at telling stories, so you'll have to bear with me. So I was 18, and school meant nothing because COVID basically gave me a free pass to graduate, as I was no longer forced into doing the curriculum. I decided that I wanted to go in the woods and just be away from society for a while. I end up deciding to go to some BLM land and screw around there. That means Bureau of Land Management for you that don't have it in your states or don't know what it is. It's basically open land to camp on, but there's no facilities or any modern luxuries. And since I'm going to be out there by myself, I take my 20-gauge shotgun. I also convinced my girlfriend, who's 3 years older than me, to buy a pistol and let me borrow it for the trip. It was a Jericho 941 FS and 9mm for those who care about that. I didn't want to get clapped by animals or crackheads, so I kept it on me at all times. So I was camping and eating the staple, baked beans, and normal stuff like that. There were no spooks just yet, or anything really. The nights were very peaceful, and I slept comfortably in my tent. A few days after, I decided to go into town for the day, but when I came back, my tent was totally destroyed. Thankfully, I left nothing of value at my campsite other than just my tent because setting it up was annoying AF. and I think, oh well, I'll just sleep in my car. I'm pretty sure it was some druggies that got mad after it was empty. I decide that I may as well not stay in the exact area since I'm not trying to get mugged in my sleep or have my windows broken in. So I go to a less visited part of the land and I decide to stay there. I do nothing for the rest of the day. I'm just kind of bummed about my tent since it was kind of expensive. The first night sleeping in my car, I have this intense feeling that somebody is there with me, that somebody is near. I shrug it off as just being spooked since my tent got screwed up. I've been camping since I was just a baby, so I'm not really scared of the woods at night, and I like to consider myself smarter than the average bear, and I was in Boy Scouts since forever. But I couldn't shrug the feeling of being watched or someone being near me, so I just took some melatonin and I drift off to sleep. But then, at some point in the night, I wake up in a cold sweat, and I swear that just for a second after I woke up, I saw eyes leering in through my window. I sit up and look around my car and I see nothing at all. I assumed it was just a hypnagogic hallucination from my groggy mind. I calm myself down a bit, and I manage to fall back to sleep. I wake up, and I step outside my car to pee and to set up camp, like my stove, for breakfast. After starting to boil some water for my oatmeal, I look back at my car to see a giant scratch along the side as if somebody keyed my car in my sleep. I get even more mad as I start feeling like this trip is just cursed to ruin all of my shit. But I eat, and for the rest of the day, nothing out of the ordinary at all happens. Until nightfall, that is. I'm up reading one of those military survival books, and I'm in my car with a flashlight because I don't want to run my car or maintain a fire. Then I hear a death squeal from a rabbit and I freak as I hadn't even encountered a small animal other than hearing birds until that point. I assume it's a coyote or something has done well to hide. So I step outside of my car and I yell out just random swear words and obscenities to F off to scare anything away from my campsite. Immediately, in response almost, I hear a quite angry sounding screech. I hop back in my car and lock the doors. I recheck my pistol and pulled up my shotgun from under the back seat. I stay up for a considerable time, checking my watch every couple of minutes. Eventually, I decide that I'm just being a pussy and I should just sleep, but I keep my shotgun by my side. So, when I eventually wake up, my car is bouncing up and down as if somebody is walking on my car. I think, what the frig? Immediately I hop up and look at the hood and the trunk, but I don't see anything. I check my 360 radius and I also see nothing. Suddenly, it's as if a sharp nail is tapping methodically against my roof. Whoever this is thinks he can spook me. I think, hell nah. I grab my shotgun and I put my back to the door and push it open to blast whoever it is on my roof. I fall on the ground and try to acquire a target, but there's nothing on my car. I think someone might be in the woods throwing rocks, so I grab my flashlight and I pan around looking for something. Nothing. There's just nothing. So I get back in my car and I stay up until dawn. I'm not leaving till daylight, but I'm also not trying to get murdered by hobos or whatever is in the woods. Finally at daylight, I hop out to collect my garbage and my assorted junk from around the new site. At this point, I'm so tired of being screwed with that I decide to unreasonably hunt this dude down, or thing, whatever is messing with me. I decide to find another campsite, but I set up a decoy sleeping area as if I were going to sleep under the stars instead of in my car. I set up some random stuff under a blanket and I make a campfire and I roll a log seat over to make it look legit as I can. Once again, I hear and see nothing until nightfall. So being me in incognito mode, I'm hiding in my car, barely able to see the decoy sleeping area. It's around midnight when I see a large man walk over to the decoy bed. He has some kind of cudgel in his hand, and he starts whacking the decoy. My Splinter Cell Conviction Time, the video game, as I pop out my shotgun in my hand with my handgun tucked in my pants. Now my shotgun was not great, so much so that when I pulled the trigger, nothing happened. The gun just doesn't fire. I'm about 6'2", pretty lean at 165 pounds. This man is easily over 7 feet tall. Definitely not a Goatman or a skinwalker, but whoever this is ugly as hell. But ironically, it does smell like kind of copperish and kinda like shit for not being either of the two. It looks almost like a Neanderthal in nature, and his large club doesn't help the comparison. I drop my shotgun and I whip out the pistol, putting terrible shots in the stomach area, and I whiffed one into the club arm. I hear that same terrible screech from the other night, and I connect the dots. I think I'm just gonna leave. Funnily, and luckily enough, we both retreat, him into the woods and me into my car. I drive 90 till in town, and I'm not really able to sleep that night. I don't return to the campsite at all till morning. Thankfully, the only thing that was there was the shotgun that I left, and it's smashed, but oh well. The blanket and my other random junk is also gone beyond belief, and it ended up being like $500 worth of stuff that got ruined. I collect what I can, and Scout's honor, leave no trace. I clean up the mess that I made. I figure the police won't be much help, so I just go home dumbfounded at my interaction with this caveman. I told my girlfriend and she didn't believe me. She thinks I took acid or something or had a crazy night of hallucinations. I have no satisfying ending. I've never heard of a caveman or a druggie found dead or anything like that around there. Sometimes I can still hear the tapping on the roof of my car in the early morning or in the late night when I'm parked, but it's not like it followed me or anything, it's just the memory. The short version is, in a woods guy meets caveman and ruins most of his camping gear by deciding to hunt it. So, do you think I encountered a crazy tall druggie or some kind of leftover caveman from a different time? So, what'd you think of those stories? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have a story of your own? I have an email in the description that you can send it to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon and some other information down there. And with that, I think I will see you in the next one. So, thank you for watching, and yeah, thanks for pulling up a stump, and I'll catch you later.